close by, yet in another sphere from our terrestrial routine. The underwater environment evokes special emotions, a sense of a different world. The alien, yet familiar surroundings have long been met with a sense of wonder and mystery. Entirely aquatic life forms coexist with semi-aquatic reptiles, birds, and mammals. In Florida's coastal and riverine waters, a broad shadow moves quietly below the surface. Breaking the water to breathe, its nostrils flare. Then, the shadow sinks back into the coffee water to reappear elsewhere, again unnoticed. A tranquil mermaid at home. The West Indian manatee, or sea cow, is a large, bewhiskered blimp of an animal that has contributed to the mermaid myth. Their scientific order, Sirenia, is named for the sirens that supposedly enticed early sailors. Although a sailor long at sea might envision a mermaid in this creature, a closer look reveals a face resembling a composite of an elephant and a tuskless walrus. Manatees may be wanting in beauty as we define it, but there is no animal that leads a more peaceful, non-aggressive existence. Our largest Florida mammal, reaching weights of more than 2,000 pounds, it is at the same time one of the most docile personalities in the animal kingdom. Manatees evolved with few natural enemies, so there was no need for powerful defenses. Then, humans entered their world, seeing them as food and leather. Ever since, the odds in their favor have been dwindling. They are victims of their own good nature and slow ways. The British recognized the manatee's plight as early as the 1700s, when they declared Florida a manatee sanctuary. But it was not until 1972, when they were included under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, that they began to receive sorely needed attention. Even the scientific community took little interest in them until the 1960s. Anyone seeing a manatee for the first time might justifiably wonder what it is. Although the relationship may not seem apparent, their closest land relative is the elephant. Millions of years ago, an animal having a common ancestry with the elephant started on an evolutionary course that eventually caused its descendants to become entirely aquatic. Take a look at the manatee's sensitive, ponderous muzzle. Flexible and capable of grasping, it might be seen as a very short trunk. And the small eye of an elephant is quite similar to that of a manatee. Also, the nails on a manatee's flippers resemble those on an elephant's feet. This aquatic cousin of the elephant was faring well when the first Europeans began exploring the New World. Large numbers were thriving in Florida, the Caribbean, and northern South America. But since then, the success of man has meant failure for the manatees. Today, only about 1,000 remain in the United States. Some occasionally range as far northward as the Carolinas during warm months. In cold weather, They're limited to natural and artificial warm water refuges in Florida, except in the warm southernmost parts of the state. Manatees' lives unfold in a relatively seasonless pattern. There is no mating season as such. When females are in heat, which may be any time, they're pursued by groups of males known collectively as mating herds. At other times, manatees frequently associate in loose social aggregations. Biologists are just beginning to understand some of the complexities of their behavior. Because mating may take place at any time, calves are born throughout the year. The gestation period is 11 months, and an average female gives birth only once every 3 to 5 years. Usually just over 1 meter long when born, a typical calf will weigh about 30 kilograms, or somewhat more than 60 pounds. The calf may leave the mother a year or 2 years later, when it will be nearly as large as she. Often it will still be nursing from the nipples located just behind each flipper. Although the calf nurses during this period of maturation, it also may begin feeding on vegetation just a few weeks after birth. The relationship between a mother and her offspring appears to be the only long-term bond between manatees. Even when the calf is only a little smaller than its mother, it continues to cling to her for security, always remaining within a safe distance, communicating with squeaks and squeals. Both parent and offspring must frequently surface to breathe. Entirely wed to an aquatic life, still, they are air-breathing mammals that require fresh oxygen. Usually, they breathe every 3 minutes or so, but they may remain submerged for as long as 15 minutes. The rapid growth of the young and the maintenance of the adults requires a substantial intake of food. When feeding, a manatee may pull food toward its mouth with its flippers, or it may merely grasp the morsel with its flexible upper lips, which serve almost like fingers in bringing food into the eager mouth. One manatee may consume as much as 100 pounds of vegetation in a single day. The diet is varied. They seem to prefer submerged varieties of plants, but are fond enough of hyacinths. It was once thought that manatees might be effective allies in the continuing battle against hyacinths, hydrilla, and other aquatic nuisances. But there are so few of them, it would take many, many times their current population to make even the slightest incursion against these pests. Still, they do a good job in isolated areas. When a manatee's hunger has been satisfied, it's not above some rest and relaxation. Although the majority of manatees are extremely shy, leaving the presence of man with energetic haste, a few have become accustomed to divers, and their fears have dissipated to the point of grabbing a passive diver and rolling. Or maybe a little ballet. The picture is romantic, this peaceful relationship between man and manatee. But behind the romance lies a harsh reality. Boats and barges have become the manatee's prime threat. It appears now that larger vessels are responsible for more actual deaths than are the props of smaller boats. A manatee resting lazily near the surface may not be aware of the approaching danger until it is too late to swim out of harm's way, or perhaps until he has been hit. Sometimes, they're even crushed against the bottom by larger vessels. Frequently, the barge and boat operators just don't see the manatees. The captain and crew may not even be aware that they have struck something, and when they do, may pass it off as a log or other debris. It is a threat with no easy solution. We cannot train the manatees to be more cautious. While the problem of smaller powerboats is serious, partial solutions have been found. Their sharp, whirling propellers inflict ugly wounds on manatees, most of which bear some testament to encounters with props. Because of the manatee's 2-inch thick layer of skin and fat, they often survive these injuries, albeit with considerable pain in many cases. Unfortunately, many are killed outright, and others die of subsequent infections. Even so, although a total resolution to the problem remains obscure, some actions have been taken to reduce these injuries. Speed restriction signs have been posted at congregating sites. When a boater ignores the warnings and fails to cut his speed, officers of the Florida Department of Natural Resources Marine Patrol make an arrest. Pointing out the signs, the officer emphasizes the reasons for the speed restrictions before issuing a ticket. In most cases, the speeders are not antagonistic when the purpose of the restrictions has been explained. But it is not possible for the Marine Patrol to be everywhere. During warm weather, when the manatees are dispersed, their safety depends largely on the caution of boaters. Another factor in manatee mortality is the danger of floodgates. During operation of the gates, manatees may be pinned underwater by the suction, if not by the gate itself, and drowned. Harassment can also be a problem, sometimes out of malice, but more often simply from human curiosity. People want to see manatees and touch them. Even touching a manatee is illegal. Today, there is a maximum fine of $20,000 and a year in prison for molesting a manatee. The majority of manatees evade the attention, even when that means swimming away from their warm refuges into water too cold for their well-being. At some of the winter refuge areas, such as the Crystal River in Florida, recreational diving attracts significant numbers of people. The manatees seem to particularly dislike the sound created by scuba gear's air bubbles. So even in the most benign of circumstances, the proximity of man to manatee may add to the manatee's woes. As Florida's population continues to boom, there will be increasing destruction of wilderness lands. Coastal mangroves have already been sharply reduced, and hardwood hammocks and other habitats are daily falling to the bulldozer to be replaced by an expanding plain of houses and other buildings. This sprawl is spilling onto the edges of the rivers and estuaries that manatees inhabit. As the forests disappear, the rivers and streams that flow through them cannot remain unchanged. Pollution and herbicide poisoning are often companions to these changes, causing the manatees' food sources to become toxic or diminished. Also, manatees may ingest debris, such as monofilament line or fish hooks, with fatal results. Currently, manatees are the subjects of intensive research which may provide clues to more effective protective measures. Although it is done as seldom as possible, occasionally, a healthy manatee must be captured alive for study. Such a capture requires an official permit from the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. Here at Blue Springs State Park in Central Florida, a team is preparing for a well-orchestrated capture. The intent is to capture the manatee as gently as possible. The nets are spread. Then the manatee is surrounded, but dives away from its would-be captors. Now, thoroughly wary, the manatee surveys for an opening. However, it is soon corralled and then guided into a large sling on which it will be lifted to be weighed. Afterwards, it will be released. But some excitement is unavoidable. Fortunately, the capture of a healthy adult is a rare necessity. Most captives are individuals that were injured in the wild and were reported to the Florida Marine Patrol. This mother, still caring for a juvenile, was tangled in the line of a crab trap near Fort Myers. For some time, she eluded attempts at assistance, but eventually was taken and removed for recovery. While being transported, the manatee needs to have her skin dampened to keep it from drying out during the unaccustomed sojourn in open air. The female and her young were taken to SeaWorld of Florida, where they were placed in a large outdoor tank in which to recuperate. The adult was suffering from a deep wound caused by the wire, but she recovered well. The Miami Seaquarium has also been an active participant in manatee studies and conservation. This is Lorelei, the first manatee born in captivity. Both Lorelei and her mother, Juliet, were under close observation during the period of rearing. Detailed records were kept of aspects of growth. Both are still doing well at the Seaquarium. Since then, there have been a few other births of captive manatees. However, most of the significant research currently underway is focused on manatees living in their natural environment. The United States Fish and Wildlife Service is sponsoring a radio tracking study of manatees' movements. At the Crystal River, a search is underway for a manatee amenable to having a radio transmitter fastened above its tail. Every collar can be identified by a specific combination of colors and individual radio frequency. The fit should be exactly right, so the collar is shortened according to the diver's suggestion. Then, it is fastened in front of the tail, a procedure most of the manatees don't relish, but it's painless and harmless. Once situated, the device is relatively unencumbering, yet will steadily transmit the animal's whereabouts. Another important aspect of manatee research is the accumulation of photographic records. Some manatees don't seem to have any particular objection to photographers. In fact, they are often as curious about the cameras as they are about any other foreign introduction into their environment, including this flag placed to warn boaters that scuba divers are in the area. Maybe the manatees figure they're in a good place to avoid being run over. Or maybe it's just their insistent curiosity, a feature that suggests more intelligence than some would ascribe to them. Systematic aerial surveys conducted by the National Fish and Wildlife Service and the Florida Audubon Society have been important in obtaining data on population locations and numbers. Some of these surveys, sponsored by Florida Power and Light, have determined manatee abundance and distribution around their power plants during the winter months. In recent winters, as many as 600 of the estimated 1,000 remaining manatees have been found in association with these facilities, emphasizing the importance of more fully understanding what effects the plants may be having on the manatees found there. At the Florida Power and Light plant at Riviera Beach, more than 10% of the entire United States population of manatees may be congregated within a small area where the plant's outflow creates a warm sanctuary. When the manatees are concentrated in these refuges, it is easier to protect them. But it is also true that a dependence on artificially warmed sites may ultimately jeopardize them. Power failures, or the shutting down of plants that have become familiar to the manatees as refuges, might contribute to manatee mortality. In 1976, a number of manatees were found dead It appears that a combination of a record cold spell and a power plant failure may have been the cause. Are they becoming too dependent on systems subject to technological failure? On the other hand, these artificial refuges provide them with additional wintering grounds that may assist them in augmenting their population. While the plants are functioning, the manatees thrive. The sites provide a relatively sheltered situation for the young. In the warm, shallow water next to the Riviera Beach plant, a mother nurses her offspring with little possibility of being gashed by the deadly blades of a passing boat's motor. The manatee's future is in the balance. Just as we brought it close to extinction, we can brighten its prospects. We owe it to this unusual, benign creature. Saving it is at least in part a matter of caution, public awareness, enforcement of laws, and ultimately, a better understanding of the animal itself.